Kerry, I appreciate your time. You're a busy guy. The Athletic, KNBR, and now you've joined YouTube. It's the Kerry Crowley Show. I've been watching, by the way. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. And now that the regular season's going to ramp up and we'll have opening day in the near future, I hope to do a lot more on YouTube. That's my goal all throughout this season. And I can't wait because the YouTube audience, as you know quite well, Brody, it's passionate, it's intense. You find real people who just, they love their teams, they love sports, and they love the community. And to me, that's what it's all about.
I'm not going to lie. I've enjoyed dipping my toes in this pool in the last couple years. It's different from what you and I are normally accustomed to, but I'm having fun with it. Let's dive in like this with the Giants. If we're evaluating this team since game 162 of last season, we're just evaluating the offseason, and if we're judging only the Giants against themselves, I mean, they've done a lot. A new manager, Matt Chapman, Jung-Hoo Lee, Robbie Ray eventually, the Soler signing. The hopes were so huge for this winter. I don't know that they could have ever fully satisfied every single person, but I think the outcome was pretty impressive. How do you feel about the winter?
Yeah, I think that the way you phrase the question is probably the right way to phrase it. Judging the Giants against themselves, judging the Giants against their own expectations. I think they've done a really good job. I think you look at Jung-Hoo Lee, he was probably a top 3 player for them this offseason when he went into the free agent market of Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, and Jung-Hoo Lee. I think they viewed him as their clear number 3, even with Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, other outstanding players out there. I think that they just saw him as someone who he's not even in his prime yet, has had so much success in the KBO, and he fits the profile of someone who should succeed at Oracle Park, a gap-to-gap hitter, can play center field, and that's just something that the Giants have needed for so long. And then they went out and addressed other needs. I think Jorge Soler being able to hit cleanup and play every day against both righties and lefties and just be a DH. Don't put him in the field. The glove's abysmal. Don't worry about that. That's tremendous. And I think one of the biggest things that this organization did is hire someone you know well in Bob Melvin. I think that one of the things that Giants fans clamored for was more stability. And in hiring Bob Melvin, they're getting someone who is comfortable working with Farhan Zaidi, is comfortable transitioning these players from AAA to the big leagues, and can do the crazy pitching things that Farhan Zaidi wants to do in San Francisco, while also acknowledging that, hey, there should be a little more push and pull between the analytics and the gut feel. And that's something that I think that Bob has just mastered through his years in the game. So if you judge them against themselves, it's great work. If you judge them against the Dodgers, everyone's going to be disappointed.
Let me make the Melvin point first, and then we'll talk about the Dodgers. I always used to say when he was in the heyday of the A's in 2018 and 19 and 90-plus win seasons, that he was alone responsible for like 5 or 6 wins along the way. And I think some people look at that and say, well, that's meaningless, 5 wins over 90 plus. But in reality, I mean, 5 extra wins for the Giants, in addition to all the players they brought in. I think his addition is significant. And obviously the history, him being a Giant, bringing in Matt Williams, bringing in an entirely different coaching staff. Like, I don't think people have even realized yet, and they will, what a difference he'll make.
Yeah, and I think that you touched on something really important and something that's been lost in a lot of what the Giants have done in the last 5 to 6 years is they've lost a lot of their history. And some of that was natural. You were never going to keep, Buster Posey, Madison Bumgarner, Brandon Crawford, and Brandon Belt in Giants uniforms through the year 2050. I just think that, naturally players retire, players go elsewhere. That's what happens. But, they've also changed executives, and Brian Sabean and Bobby Evans have cycled through. And, even this morning, as we record this, Renel Brooks-Moon is out as the public address announcer, which is probably the most shocking change the organization could possibly make. It's an abomination. And I think that, there's people who feel really strongly about the history of this organization because ever since 1958, when the Giants moved west, they've been fans and it's been passed down generation to generation. And so getting Bob Melvin, someone who understands the culture of the organization, someone who understands the tie to the Bay Area and what this franchise really means to people locally, I think that you can't downplay the significance of that from just a fan appreciation standpoint, which the Giants have really struggled with over the past few years. But also, you mentioned it, the baseball stuff. I look at what he did in Oakland with transitioning Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Sean Manaea, all these players to the big league level. Marcus Semien, he'd come up with the White Sox and had struggled. He found his footing under Bob Melvin. This is someone who, as the Giants are prepared to graduate a ton of prospects to the big leagues, or have players who are coming off their rookie season and looking to make that second-year jump. This is someone who has a proven track record of doing that. And to me, that's maybe the most compelling reason you go out and you hire Bob Melvin. I can't wait to see how that plays out this year.
You know what our 9-year-old dog over here is named at the Brazil house?
Is it Melvin?
Melvin, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
We've known about Bob Melvin for a while over here, and that's why I'm saying I think coming to the Giants is so huge. So let's go to that alternate universe for just a second. Let's go back and say that the Giants landed Shohei Ohtani this past winter. But let's also say, in a weird way, that maybe that was their big move and their only splash, and Yamamoto didn't come with it, and Chapman didn't come with it, and maybe Robbie Ray or Soler didn't come with it. I'm here to say that in that alternate universe, as much as fans wanted Ohtani, if that's all they had got this winter for San Francisco, there would also be a lot more concern and conversation because it's the old all your eggs in one basket. And I think with him and the uncertainty of pitching in the future and even how the Dodgers structured the salary and displaced all the money, all that stuff, I think this is actually a better fit whether people have realized it or not. And I just think the Ohtani thing got so blown up, it got so exaggerated that in retrospect, we'll look at it differently 1 year, 2 years, and 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And what I'd say about Ohtani is if he was the Giants' maybe lone major acquisition, and they made a few moves on the margins, you're looking at a team that closely resembles the Angels. And the Angels haven't been good. And the Giants don't have Mike Trout to pair with Shohei Ohtani.
Exactly. So, they haven't had a winning record since 2014. Trout and Ohtani, it's amazing what they didn't do in Anaheim. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, well, I think that you're looking at a team that more closely resembles the Angels, and that's not what's going to help the Giants compete in the National League West. I said at the outset of the offseason, hiring Bob Melvin should be step 1 of 50 of a plan to not rebuild the Giants, but reset the Giants, because competing with the Dodgers was not going to be done overnight, whether or not the Dodgers signed Yamamoto, Ohtani, traded for Glasnow, or not. I think that you're looking at what the Texas Rangers did a few years ago, which is commit $1 billion over 2 off seasons. I think that the Giants are very much in a position to where over 2 off seasons, $750 million to $1 billion is probably what it's going to take through free agency on top of graduating all those prospects to the big leagues and finding the hidden gems in the farm system and getting the random player on waivers that Farhan Zaidi seems to get once a year or once every 2 years who hits like a Tyro Estrada. Yeah. And I think that that's the key for this organization. It's not one player. It's you need to upgrade slots 2 through 10 on your roster. You've got a great number 1 in Logan Webb, but if you don't have 2 through 10, you're not going to go anywhere.
I think they've got a great closer, too. I want to talk about Camilo later on in a second. But just looking at last year, and I realize so many things are different from last season to probably this season, but the tailspin started in the second half with the lack of offense. And they were fine to a certain degree up to a certain point. But how do you see the top of the order this season playing out and panned out? Because they've got some nice pieces. They've got some complementary pieces. I'd say at least 1 through 5.
Yeah, I think you look at August and September of last year, and everyone couldn't wait for Wilmer Flores to hit. And I mean this, no disrespect to Wilmer Flores, who had a career year, but you can't go into games expecting Wilmer Flores to put the team on his back. That's going to work once a week, once every 10 days. This year, you've got Jung-Hoo Lee, Matt Chapman, Jorge Soler, Tyro Estrada. 4 of those guys should be holding down the top 5 slots in the order. And whether you want to put Mike Yastrzemski or Michael Conforto in as a left-hander to kind of ease that, righty-lefty thing that managers like to do right now. And then you've got the kids coming up at the bottom of the order in, a Patrick Bailey and a Marco Luciano at shortstop when he eventually comes up. Right now, it'll probably be Nick Ahmed on opening day. But I think that there's so much more stability, so much more projectability for this team than there was last year, and far less confusion. You've got guys last year in Casey Schmidt who were forced into action. They had to be the guy. And, there were certain days where Casey just wasn't ready. And this year, Casey will probably start out at AAA, and he'll have to force his way to the big leagues. Luis Matos will have to force his way to the big leagues. And that's a great thing, because when guys are hitting 400, 450 down at AAA Sacramento, that's when they're ready for a promotion. It's not when they're hitting 280 and the OPS climbs above 900, because we've seen the PCL numbers lie and lie and lie. You just need guys who do this for a month, 2 months at a time. And then an injury happens, then they come up, and that's when your depth is felt. That's what the Giants had in 2021, and they've missed the last 2 years.
The baseball carries in the PCL. I think we all are very well aware of that. Hey, the
Yes.
Matt Chapman contract, by the way, as much as I'll speak well about Bob Melvin, Matt Chapman, another guy, grown
Yeah.
to love over the years. But the contract's interesting. 3 years, opt-outs after every single year. And I understand the worry among Giants fans is that if he does so well, that he might land somewhere else for the long term. Yeah, I don't know. Quite honestly, I think he came to San Francisco for a reason and a purpose. I think he's going to have to go to the moon in order to opt out of maybe even between year 1 and year 2. And look, I hope that's the case for San Francisco. I hope he does do really well in this first year with the Giants. But how do you feel about just the structure of it?
I think it's a really interesting contract, and I like it for 2 reasons. One, if Matt Chapman has the year of his life, and he says that all those teams were wrong, they didn't bet on me, I should have gotten 9 figures. He has the year of his life in San Francisco under Bob Melvin again. Where's he going to want to go? And where are the Giants going to want to move on from him?
Right.
It's not going to happen. They will be in the driver's seat to sign Matt Chapman long term and get him on that 5-year, $125 million deal that he wants, or something similar if he really does opt out after a great season. And let's say he doesn't opt out. This contract is no worse than the contract that they acquired back in 2017 for Evan Longoria. And that was at the time something like 5 years, $72 million that they were committed to Evan Longoria through age 32 through 37 of Longoria's career. And he's a great. I think that Evan Longoria will get a few Hall of Fame votes because he's the greatest player in Tampa Bay Rays history. He's not a Hall of Fame player, but he's Hall of very good. And I think that Matt Chapman, you're getting him a year or 2 younger, and you're getting him in a contract that's more favorable. This is not a burden to a team. If Matt Chapman is injured or, all of a sudden forgets how to hit right-handed pitching, 2 years down the line, you can have him platooning. You can have him as a DH. You've got Casey Schmidt coming through the organization. You've got Tyler Fitzgerald. This is not a burdensome contract in the way that I think a lot of people viewed a potential Matt Chapman deal would be. So I think it's a great deal for the Giants. Maybe not necessarily for Chapman, but he gets to reunite with Bob Melvin. He gets to come back to the Bay Area, a place where he's had a ton of success. And if he's, great, as we said, I think he'll be a Giant long term.
Yeah, and wait till you see the leadership inside the clubhouse. I really feel like this team needed somebody like that who's got that dog in him. He really does. And I also want to say this too. Wait until you see him charge a bunt for the first time. Wait till you see him make a play in the hole for the first time. I think defensively, adding a 4-time Gold Glover is so huge. And the father-son relationship, I kid you not, that exists between Bob Melvin and Matt Chapman. A lot of people said, well, it was easy to call Chapman to the Giants because I said that a long time ago. But I'm telling you, knowing those two, knowing the situation, if they were even close, I think that was going to bridge the gap. Ultimately, it probably did. Jung-Hoo Lee is fascinating to me. He's got the Ichiro-inspired swing, the Ichiro-inspired number 51. As you said before, a contact hitter, real singles hitter. I think that's going to play well, especially in the leadoff spot. I just looked up his stats, hitting .348 this spring for whatever you want to read into it. And you need him to set the table. Everybody talks about how things transfer over from playing anywhere in Asia, any one of those leagues, to coming over to the United States in Major League Baseball. It's interesting how we never hold that against pitchers like Yamamoto, like people think he'll do just fine, but we always think hitters are going to struggle to some certain extent. Even if he struggles and only hits .290, you know what I'm saying? I really like this pickup. I really do.
I mean, league average was what, .248 last year?
Not good.
And so for Jung-Hoo Lee, I know that you're supposed to, and I do care about OPS, but I actually really don't care about OPS in the case of Jung-Hoo Lee if the average and OBP are what I think they could be. If it's 290 or 300 and then 340, 350, because the Giants struggle to get guys on base. I mean, they struggled to make contact for a lot of last year.
Yeah.
So many strikeouts. And I think that when you play at Oracle Park and you look around the rest of the National League West, I know you're not playing 19 times a season, but you are still playing 6 or 7 road games at Petco Park, at Chase Field, at Coors Field, which are huge ballparks. Jung-Hoo Lee is the type of player who can take advantage of all of that and instill confidence in the rest of the lineup. He's someone who's going to make contact. He's someone who's consistently proven throughout his career that he can get on base. And the Giants just haven't had that element for so long. It's been lacking speed. It's been lacking contact. It's been lacking consistency at the top of the order. You've seen a rotation of players over the last 5-6 years, and that's going to end with Jung-Hoo Lee. And that's what really, I think, should excite Giants fans. It's why I'm predicting Jung-Hoo Lee will sell more jerseys than any other player this year on the Giants, including Matt Chapman, Jorge Soler, Logan Webb, Camilo Doval. He should sell more jerseys if he's the type of player who comes over from Korea and is what we think he can be.
I'm going to counter you on that. If Sandoval makes the team, No, I don't know.
I think a lot of those will be older jerseys. Yeah.
I'm not sure if they want the new version of jerseys, if you know what I'm saying, by the way.
Yes.
No, and I think this same thing with Jung-Hoo Lee, just the Ichiro swing, and he's out of the box so quick. He makes contact, and if he can put those balls in gaps, I mean, he can end up at second base more often than even just having a single. Let's move on defensively to the shortstop position, which is obviously so critical for any team. One of your leaders typically plays shortstop, and that was the case for so many years with Brandon Crawford, and yeah, it looks weird to see him in Cardinals colors. I think that's going to take a while for anybody to get used to. But what do the Giants do now at shortstop? And is it maybe an evolution of a position where how they start this year opening day, it may not look that way, let's say, by the All-Star break?
Yeah, in a best case scenario, it won't look that way by the All-Star break.
Yeah.
But I think that the big concern right now is Marco Luciano has not looked good, did not look good last year. I mean, this spring has been brutal for him from a strikeout percentage ratio of his plate appearances. I think, it's really tough because he was labeled as a 16-year-old way back in 2016 as the guy who was going to be the heir apparent to Brandon Crawford. And we saw how that weighed on Joey Bart when he was the number 2 overall pick to be the heir apparent to Buster Posey. And that's Joey Bart growing up in Georgia like Buster Posey,
right.
Number 2 pick, so top 5 like Buster Posey, playing college baseball, something that Marco Luciano didn't have the opportunity to do. I mean, I just think his transition to the United States has been so challenging, and people don't even realize what these kids from the Dominican Republic and Venezuela have to go to just to be able to communicate with their teammates, let alone feel comfortable in the batter's box and on the field. And so he's 22 years old. You don't want to write off a 22-year-old just yet. I think you give him till he's 24, 25 to really see what you have in him, because he's still growing into his body. That much is clear from seeing the pictures of him last year versus what you've seen during spring training. But I just don't think that opening day was ever realistic for Marco Luciano. And I think that Farhan Zaidi may have made a mistake in the offseason in saying that we are giving him the pathway to the opening day roster instead of saying, we'd like to go out and acquire coverage for ourselves,
right.
Because it adds this burden that he's had to carry throughout his minor league career, being the bonus baby of, getting $2 million when he first signed. And so I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. I think Nick Ahmed will be a great opening day shortstop defensively. He'll be your 9 hitter. His OPS plus has never been above 95 in his major league career. I think best case scenario, Luciano's the guy June 1st. More than likely, you see Casey Schmidt, Tyler Fitzgerald in a rotation of guys throughout this season.
And that's exactly why I asked it that way. I feel like it's got an idea of how it could start this year, but shortstop in the long term still very much up in the air. What do you think is the ultimate end game for San Francisco shortstop wise? I mean, let's say next year.
I'd love to bet on Luciano, but I don't know that I'm in a position to do that just yet. I think that you'd like to, I talked about this earlier. You want to see Casey Schmidt go down to AAA Sacramento and have just a tremendous month or 2 months in the PCL. For Marco Luciano, I think the Giants will be eager to call him up after 2 weeks. I think they'll be eager to call him up after, 25 good at bats. I think realistically, he probably needs 3 months at AAA Sacramento. We're talking about someone with 39 major league at bats, someone with fewer than 100 at AAA Sacramento, just 22 years old. I think he needs 3 months. And I don't know that the Giants are in position to give him that time, because how long is Nick Ahmed going to stay healthy and productive and hit for you? It's an open question. So I hope that they give him that time. I hope that Nick Ahmed is the stopgap that they need, that Fitzgerald and Schmidt can be. But if you're projecting to 2025, I have no clue, Brody.
There's not a turnkey situation at shortstop for them. And again, that's something they had for so long. It was never a question. Now, all of a sudden, it is. I heard this stat over the weekend that the Giants stole the fewest bases in Major League Baseball last year. It wasn't even something that was on my radar. Didn't really think about it that way.
The eye test.
Yeah. So they've got the horses now. Some I would at least think could steal bases. And you mentioned before the philosophy change that if the front office isn't going to make all of the baseball type-ish decisions, is this a team that could steal more bases this year? And if they do, how much does that actually help them?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to be more exciting on the base pass than they've been the last 2 years because it's like MLB changed the rules and opened up these running lanes, and the Giants have been in the slow lane. It's like these rules did not impact the
Yeah.
San Francisco Giants and
Yeah.
every other team. It was most striking, and I think every Giants fan who follows the team on a day-to-day basis saw this in September when they played the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks had all this young talent, and they just ran
Right.
circles around the Giants on the base pass. I mean, the Giants were terrible defensively because they can't run. They were terrible on the bases because they can't run. And the Diamondbacks were the exact opposite. Like you got someone on, he was on third base immediately within 3, 4, 5 pitches. And it was the Giants got exposed by the Arizona Diamondbacks last year. And so I think that the goal this year should be just to get back to neutral. I mean, just to get back to the point where you're not giving up as many bases and you're taking some with Jung-Hoo Lee and Matt Chapman, who's an above average runner, going first to third. I mean, that's something that the Giants haven't done. Going first to third is like a foreign concept for them. So, yeah, I think it's great that they've got increased athleticism, but I don't think that they'll suddenly be a top 10 or 15 team. I think it's just don't give up runs on the bases like they have been.
Yeah, and you make a great point about just the rule change last year of the pitch clock and the disengagements. Like if you're going to open it up, base running, and you're going to encourage that with the new rules, and you're still the last place team in terms of stolen base success, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. You got to be better there.
Tough to watch.
Looking at the rotation for this year, and it's interesting in a lot of ways, right? Jordan Hicks returns to actually starting games. Robbie Ray could be a huge injection, still hoping around the All-Star break for his return. Kyle Harrison, huge expectations, and certainly Logan Webb already has the bar set high. The question is, like, can you keep it up there? Can you keep maintaining that? How are you feeling about the rotation to start this year and maybe what to expect from the pitching staff?
I think it's almost a generational gamble the Giants have taken on their young pitching in terms of what the organization has historically done with pitching. Because, since the ballpark opened in 2000, they knew that it was going to be a pitcher's park, and they kind of built these rosters. Their best teams were built through, veteran starting pitching, guys who came up through the farm system, and Lincecum, Cain, and Bumgarner. And this year, the Giants are taking an approach kind of modeled after what other teams, the Dodgers, the A's, the Rays, the Cleveland Guardians really come to mind, in that you're just going to graduate your prospects and see who's got it and see who doesn't. And you're going to have 6, 7, 8 guys making major league debuts this year who are all going to throw 80 to 90 to 100 innings. And some of those guys will have ERAs in the low 3s. Some of them will have ERAs in the low 5s. And you'll try and stick with the guys by the middle and end of the season who prove that they're worth it. And I think that they'll try out Mason Black and Keaton Wynn and Carson Wisenhunt and all these young pitchers who some have great potential. This Landon Roop guy is just lighting up spring training right now with the sinker curveball combination that everyone's talking about. And I think that their goal is, if we bring up 12 or 13 arms from our farm system this year and give them the chance to start, if 2 of them hit, great. That's all you need. It's really all you need.
Yeah.
If you've got Logan Webb and Kyle Harrison and Alex Cobb coming back in mid-May, and then Robbie Ray. So it's just get through the first months. Don't fall out of the wild card race because of your young pitching. And then you can narrow it down to who's good and who's not, and we'll see what happens. But it is a gamble unlike anything Giants fans have seen, but it's a gamble that's increasingly common around baseball right now.
Is Webb putting himself in the Lincecum, Matt Cain, Bumgarner category yet? Is that where he ends up in a couple years?
Gosh, it's just such a tough decision, because I think he might be my favorite player of the last 7, 8 years since I've been covering Giants baseball since 2017.
Yeah.
Logan Webb's the guy. He's the guy in the clubhouse who hates losing more than anyone. I think everyone loves winning. And, you see in a major league clubhouse after a game, guys love to win. Someone gets their first hit, they get celebrated. Someone gets their first win as a pitcher, you get celebrated. But the difference really shows up when teams lose games, because there are people who just shrug it off and say, we've got another one tomorrow. And there are people who sit there and they spew and they're pissed. Yeah. And Logan Webb is that guy, and they need more of that. Kyle Harrison, I think, is going to follow in that mold. And so I think that he can be with a playoff run. I think that he will enter that conversation of Cain and Lincecum and Bumgarner with a playoff run, and it might even take a World Series ring. But I don't know that 5 straight years of 200 innings will get them there because those guys are on such a pedestal. I think that he'll enter a different conversation of beloved giant, someone who got them through an era, someone who, the 12 to 18-year-old Giants fan right now will look at one day and say, I remember when Logan Webb was throwing 200 innings a year for the San Francisco Giants. They'll look back at that fondly, but without a playoff run, it's hard to put him in that same category right now.
That's a great point. You got to do it well in the regular season, but you got to be a postseason winner to probably be in that conversation. Camilo Doval last year, 67 innings pitched, 87 Ks in 67, I think in a third innings, 39 saves. It would have been so great had he just got to 40 just for the sake of getting to 40. I think as you look at this team, this roster, and everybody wants to nitpick and what could they have done better, I feel like he's one of the most underrated pieces that not enough people talk about. And I also want to say that if you're a team that's trying to make strides and get better and trying to compete, I think, for a playoff spot by the end of this year, every win counts. And when you've got a lockdown closer like that, I think it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, slowest heartbeat of not just any baseball player, maybe anyone I've ever met. I mean, there were times where I would interview Camilo Doval when he was a rookie in 2021, and I was like, is this guy alive right now? Like,
in a good way.
Like a very, very smart guy. The answers that he would give were like in-depth and very funny and interesting, but I'm like, are you talking or like what's going on right now? And he takes the mound and it's like he walks out there and it's really unlike anything I've ever seen because there is such a difference between Camilo Doval and Brian Wilson. And yet I think of them similarly because Brian Wilson got the job done. Brian Wilson was a great closer for the San Francisco Giants, but he always had guys on base. And Camilo Doval, guy gets on base, you immediately worry. There's some pitchers who you think are going to get through it no matter what. Those guys get through it no matter what, but you never feel good about them doing it. And I think that's what I appreciate about Camilo. So he makes the ninth inning entertaining, but for Giants fans, he makes it entertaining in a fun way because they get to win when Camilo's on the mound.
Right. Well, hopefully you see a lot of him this year doing his thing. Catching-wise, couple catchers in camp. We obviously know Patrick Bailey and who he is and what he's projected to be. Kind of a small sample size last year, not the full season to really judge him on. And we also understand that in Major League Baseball, it's hard for catchers to emerge, to grow. They take a little bit longer time than other position players. What do you see his season panning out to be, and maybe what would the expectations be?
Yeah, I always said this about Buster Posey, and he could not bring a bat to the ballpark and still have a positive outcome on a game.
Right,
and I think Patrick Bailey is that type of a catcher. I mean, you saw it a little bit with Sean Murphy, and you were thankful that he brought the bat to the ballpark in Oakland because, he crushed the ball. But there were times toward the end, 2018, 2019 for Buster, where it was just a single or nothing. He had nothing left in the hips. And then 2021 comes around, and he's all of a sudden Buster in his prime again. With Bailey, I think that this year will be a struggle offensively. I just think that, we saw him get off to such a hot and unexpected start at the plate last year, and the numbers looked far more pedestrian by the end of the run. And I think it's going to be a gradual growth for him at the major league level. I think that by 2026, he could be, a league average or slightly above league average offensive player, but his calling card's always going to be the glove. It's going to be shutting down guys on the base pass, which is what he did so well last year. I think you're looking at a multi-time Gold Glove Award winner in the future and someone who can hold down the position for 10 years, playing 120, 130 plus games behind the plate, which is increasingly rare nowadays where you see time splits for catchers. I think that Patrick Bailey by 2025 will be back there more often than we've seen for a Giants catcher, probably since Posey's prime. And then moving forward, I think you'll see a great offensive player, but you said it well. It's just hard to emerge. It's hard to get every element of the game down. And I don't expect a great offensive season for him. I think there will be days where he's hitting 8th and 9th, and that's fine.
It's rare that we would talk about a PA announcer like a player on the team, but when Renel Brooks-Moon has done more than 2,000 games and was the first and only voice of, I'll still call it, Pac Bell Park, I literally went to the opening series, exhibition series. I think it was Giants-Yankees. It was April 2000. The ballpark was just opening, and hearing her voice take over as a familiar voice in media and broadcasting for all the years, and she's only even become more iconic because of that presence and announcing baseball games at Oracle Park. This is shocking, and I don't know all the details, and I'm not going to pretend to know the entire story of what's going on or how it all plays out. The one thing I do know and understand and respect is somebody who's in this field, her longevity and what she's been doing around here for so long makes her iconic. And I think that's why it makes this separation, or whatever we're calling it, pretty shocking to find out a couple weeks before the start of a baseball season.
Yeah, I mean, Brody, when I found out the news, I practically wanted to cry this morning. I mean, seriously, that's how much Renel has meant to me and anyone who's gone to a game at Oracle Park. And I think you know this well. The press box, when you first enter it, can be a really intimidating space, regardless of, how long you've been a member of the media. If you've covered a team in a different market, I think that the press box itself is just, there's so many people in there. It's such a busy workspace that it can feel uninviting, cold, and
territorial, I think sometimes.
Very territorial.
Yeah.
And when you stepped into Renel's booth, it was the most inviting place in the whole ballpark. I think that what the culture that Renel fostered on the broadcast level, you felt it in the way that Dwayne Kuiper and Mike Krukow broadcast a game, because they'd spent, an hour in the press box beforehand interacting with Renel. It's impossible to come away from a conversation with her and not feel better about yourself, not feel better about life, not feel better about everything, because she just radiates positivity and joy, and she's so courageous. She's so brave. I think that she's helped so many people behind the scenes. And I think that if this move really came down to the Giants wanting a new voice, or the Giants not being willing to meet a contractual need for Renel, it's one of the saddest things that the organization will ever do. It really will be. And I think that it's reflective of ownership that they couldn't get the job done, because if you ask any Giants fan right now what their main issue with the organization is, I think 90% would tell you ownership. And it's just gotten to the point where they've done so many things to drive away fans, but this might be the biggest thing to drive away fans. It's that shocking to walk into Oracle Park and hear a different voice.
I think a lot of people surrounding a team, whether it's broadcasters or in this case, public address announcers, you want to feel like you're part of the presentation and the product. Yeah. And again, to your point, I just think a lot of people, when they show up for this baseball season, and that's a big part of it, like how the sounds, how the ballpark looks, how it feels, but how it sounds, like she's almost entirely responsible for that. And it's the only voice that the ballpark has ever known. So,
yeah. And the crazy thing is, opposing players would say, when they would sign with the Giants, they'd say one of the first things they'd look forward to is hearing Renel call their voice on
Say my name.
How many PA announcers do you know?
Yeah.
Like, how many PA announcers around Major League Baseball? 5, 6?
Yeah.
Could you pick out and say, I know that person? That's partly because we work in media, and so we know a few. But for the average fan, you go to different ballparks, it's usually a generic voice. Renel's voice is the least generic you've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's the most inviting. It made you feel like Oracle Park was home, and the ballpark won't be the same without her. I'll leave it at that. It can't be the same without Renel.
Well, she's been around for so long. My first memories of her were on KMEL back in the day. Yes. I think when I was in high school. So,
driving to school.
I know she'll be around in one way or another. But I hope that in some way this works out better than maybe it seems at this point.
Yeah.
2 more things, and I really appreciate your time. So big picture for the Giants this season, I don't know what the answer is. Like, what is this season? I've written down a couple hypotheticals here. You tell me if I'm right on this. This season is either a proving ground for the front office, like they started to turn the ship in the right direction, or it's a step forward in rebuilding. I think you made that point earlier. This is phase 1 of maybe even another year and another winter of building, or maybe this turns out instantly to be a contending team. Maybe they arrive ahead of schedule. If I'm looking for a theme of this year, what is this season even all about?
I think that this is the most pivotal year of the Farhan Zaidi era, which started November 4th, 2018. So we're 6 years beyond that now. And it is the defining year for him because he's on his second manager. He has transitioned the entire roster now to this point, save for Austin Slater. I think he's the last player who wasn't called up during Farhan Zaidi's tenure as the Giants president of baseball operations. And he's, now signed Jung-Hoo Lee to the 9-figure contract that fans have been clamoring for a long-term deal with someone. And I just think, like, if they don't get it right this year, and getting it right is probably a wild card berth, there's big questions about where the organization is headed moving forward, because I could see a scenario where, they make a change at the front office level after this season if it doesn't go well. And I don't know that Giants fans are ready to think about that yet, but I think that, it's just to the point where all of the players are his. All of the payroll committed is his, and the manager is his second. So it's the most pivotal year for Farhan Zaidi's tenure. And I think, moving forward, if they have to start over, you're looking at probably a 4 to 5 year build after that. Right. So this is a critical year for the Giants, because if they get this wrong, you're looking at the 1970s all over again for the San Francisco Giants.
Wait, they're moving back to Candlestick? No.
Yeah, exactly. It's
impossible.
I mean, the ballpark's not going to feel as fun without Renel. So who knows?
All right, last thing here, and this is totally a switch of gears. I'm throwing you a curveball on this one. Somebody like yourself who's fully immersed in the Giants side of things and the Giants baseball world, I want to get your take on the A's situation, and maybe from the extent of how the Bay Area would be different when and if the A's actually move to Las Vegas. I don't expect you to know all the details or recite all the facts here, because it's a totally separate situation from the Giants, but your perspective from the Giants side of things.
I mean, I just think it's a cultural loss. Some of my favorite memories are covering Bay Bridge Series games, or even, one of the best games I ever covered, and A's fans certainly won't feel this way, was the wild card game between the A's and Rays, because I've never seen a fan base show up to a ballpark,
packed,
Mount Davis open, and just ready for first pitch. Like, they could not wait. After the Yankees lost the year before, finally getting the home game in the wild card game, I just remember how great that ballpark was. And I don't know that I've felt, because I didn't cover the World Series era Giants, I don't know that I felt a ballpark with that type of energy pulsating through it. And to lose something like that, it's just, you can't really even put it into words or describe it, because it's part of everything that I've grown up with and known about Bay Area baseball. So it's just a irreplaceable void. And maybe they start over one day and there's an expansion team that comes to Oakland, but even that doesn't feel right to me. Like, I give the expansion team to Vegas, find a way to keep the A's at home. And look, if you could somehow have John Fisher on the expansion team and a new owner in Oakland, that to me is what feels right. I'd love to see a waterfront ballpark for the A's. I'd love to see this rivalry continue, because it won't be a rivalry in Vegas. There's no way to make it that. So I think it's just a profound cultural loss that we won't begin to understand until 5 to 10 years down the line.
People have joked with me that Bridge Trophy should be mine for some reason. I'm here to say that we might want to use it as a boat anchor. Like,
exactly.
But again, you hit it so perfectly in saying that we have not yet realized what will be lost. And that's what A's fans are going through right now. But I think even Giants fans, to a large degree, when it comes time to, wait, there's no more Bay Bridge Series and the trash talk we used to have. And then there's going to be that weird thing in 5 to 10 years of former A's fans who were so invested in one team, they're kind of in no man's land of what to be, who to root for. And I just think it's going to be an interesting time if that actually happens. And I think,
I don't know any Giants fans, Brody, that want the A's to move. Like, you probably see a few on social media. You probably see a few pop up on YouTube comments. I don't know any in person. Everyone who I know has always had a positive experience going to the Coliseum. They've loved the trash talk with A's fans, because always in good nature. Like, it's a rivalry that I think is fun for fans. It's not bitter like the Giants-Dodgers rivalry can turn into. It's like, we're all Northern California against Southern California. So it's that type of a thing.
It's not divisional yet. Wait until Major League Baseball ends the American and National League. Then it'll be territorial. But Kerry, I really appreciate this. It's been great to chat with you. And just one more time here, since when we premiere this, maybe the most people will be watching here by the end. You're doing it on YouTube. You started the channel a while back. Is that right?
Yeah, I started back at the end of the 2023 season. So I've been going throughout the offseason. Took a huge hiatus here in the month of March.
It's all right.
But I was all because I started up with KMBR a lot more. And once opening day comes around, a lot more on YouTube for me. So planning a big thing next week for the YouTube channel, Kerry Crowley Show. And we're doing 2-3 times a week on Giants baseball and the state of the team, the state of the franchise, and hopefully the state of an ownership that changes course and finally starts to get things. I think A's fans know that. So.
Well, I just want to promote what you're doing. And obviously, as my channel shifts gears and changes and grows, I'd love to talk to you again down the road. So this has been
Anytime.
great.
Thank you so much, Brody.
Yeah, appreciate it.